The knock on my front door came just after 9 in the morning, and the moment I opened it, I knew something terrible had happened. My best friend, Maren stood on my porch wearing the same blue dress she had worn on her date the night before. Her mascara had turned into dark shadows beneath her eyes, one of her heels was missing, and she was holding her purse against her chest as if it were the only thing keeping her together. She looked like someone who had been walking through a storm all night. Then she looked at me with eyes full of exhaustion and heartbreak and asked one simple question. Could she stay with me? Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of friendship that changes lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who need them most. I had known Maren for 12 years. We met during our first week of college when she accidentally spilled coffee on my notebook and spent an hour helping me rewrite my notes. We became inseparable after that. She was bright, funny, and the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel important. But over the years, life had not been gentle with her. Her father died when she was 22. Her mother moved across the country and rarely called. She threw herself into work and built a successful career as a graphic designer, but every relationship she tried seemed to end with disappointment. I had watched her recover from broken promises more times than I could count. Still, I had never seen her look the way she looked that morning. I stepped aside without asking questions, and she walked into my small house. The sun was shining outside. Birds were singing. It was one of those beautiful summer mornings that seemed almost cruel when someone's world was falling apart. She sat on my couch and stared at the floor. I made coffee. She didn't touch it. For nearly 10 minutes neither of us said anything. Then I noticed her hands were shaking. I sat beside her. And suddenly she started crying. Not the kind of crying that comes with tears and sniffles. This was different. This was the kind of crying that seemed to come from years of loneliness and disappointment all at once. She leaned forward and buried her face in her hands. I put my arm around her shoulders and waited. Eventually, she whispered that she had made a terrible mistake. 3 months earlier she had met a man named Preston at a friend's birthday party. He was charming, successful, and attentive. He sent flowers to her office and remembered small details about her life. For the first time in years, she believed she had finally met someone who genuinely cared about her. The night before had been their official date. He had taken her to an expensive restaurant and spent the evening talking about himself. Then, after dinner, he told her he wasn't interested in a serious relationship. He only wanted someone casual. Someone convenient. Someone who didn't ask for commitment. She said the words felt like tiny knives. Everything he had done before that night suddenly seemed fake. She realized she had spent months imagining a future with someone who had never planned to stay. But that wasn't why she was standing on my porch. After leaving the restaurant, she went back to her apartment. And when she walked inside, she discovered something that shattered her. The landlord had left an eviction notice on her door. She had forgotten to pay 2 months of rent. Her company had downsized 6 weeks earlier and she had lost her job. She'd been living off her savings while desperately searching for work. She hadn't told anyone. Not even me. She said she felt embarrassed and ashamed. She had spent the last month pretending everything was fine while secretly wondering how long she could survive. Last night's rejection was simply the final thing that broke her. She looked at me and asked if she could stay for a few days until she figured things out. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I hugged her. Then I told her she could stay as long as she needed. She cried even harder. The truth was that my life wasn't exactly perfect either. I worked as a mechanic and lived alone in a modest house that I had inherited from my grandfather. Money was always tight, and my days were simple and predictable. But when someone you love is drowning, you don't ask how inconvenient it is to throw them a rope. You simply throw it. I helped her carry her things from her car. 2 suitcases. A box of books. A small bag of clothes. That was all she had left. As I watched her unpack in the guest room, I realized how quickly a life could change. One day you have a career, an apartment, and dreams of a future. The next day you're living out of suitcases in your best friend's spare room. That evening we sat on the porch watching the sunset. For the first time all day, she smiled. A tiny, fragile smile. It reminded me of the girl I met years ago. Over the next week she stayed mostly in the guest room, applying for jobs and trying to figure out her next step. I gave her space. But I worried. She wasn't eating much. She barely slept. Sometimes I would hear her walking around the house at 3 in the morning. One night I found her sitting in the kitchen with tears in her eyes. She admitted she felt like a failure. She was 32 years old and sleeping in her best friend's house because she had nowhere else to go. I told her something my grandfather used to say. A storm doesn't mean you're lost. It only means you're walking through bad weather. She smiled sadly. I don't think she believed me then. Days turned into weeks. She sent out dozens of applications. No one called. She became quieter. The light in her eyes faded. Then one afternoon something unexpected happened. I came home from work and found her sitting on the living room floor surrounded by old photographs. She had discovered a dusty box in my attic. Inside were pictures of my grandparents. Letters. Postcards. Memories. She spent hours looking through them. One photograph caught her attention. It showed my grandparents sitting on this same porch 50 years earlier. They looked happy. Deeply in love. On the back of the photograph my grandfather had written something. Home isn't a place. It's the people who make you feel safe. She read those words over and over again. Then she looked at me. And something changed. The next morning she made breakfast for both of us. Then she cleaned the house. Then she suggested we repaint the porch because the old paint was peeling. Little by little she began coming back to life. I realized she didn't need solutions. She needed purpose. She needed to feel useful again. Over the following weeks we worked on the house together. We repaired broken shelves. Planted flowers. Fixed the old fence. Every evening we sat outside and talked about everything and nothing. For the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. And I don't think she was either. Then one afternoon she received an email. A small local bookstore needed someone to design promotional material and help manage their social media. The pay wasn't great. But it was a start. She nearly cried from happiness. She got the job. Life slowly became brighter. She started laughing again. The dark circles under her eyes disappeared. The house felt warmer. Then one evening, while we were eating dinner, she looked at me and said something that made my heart stop. She said she didn't know what would have happened if I hadn't opened the door that morning. I shrugged and said that's what friends are for. But she kept staring at me. Then she admitted something. During all those years of friendship, I had always been the person who made her feel safe. I had been there through every heartbreak and every disappointment. I had celebrated her victories and carried her through her losses. And somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that love doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it quietly waits beside you for years. I didn't know what to say. Because the truth was, I had loved her for a very long time. I simply never believed she could feel the same. I never told her because our friendship meant too much to risk losing. The silence between us lasted several seconds. Then she smiled. A real smile. And for the first time, I wondered if perhaps life had been leading us somewhere all along. Nothing changed immediately. We didn't suddenly become a couple. We simply continued living together. But something was different. There was a softness between us. An understanding. A feeling that we were standing at the edge of something beautiful. A month later she found a tiny apartment across town. She came into the kitchen holding the lease papers. I expected her to be excited. Instead she looked sad. She said she wasn't sure she wanted to leave. I didn't know what to say. Because I didn't want her to leave either. The house had become a home again. And I couldn't imagine coming back to empty rooms. That night I barely slept. The next morning I found her sitting on the porch. She looked nervous. Then she admitted she had been thinking about my grandfather's words. Home isn't a place. It's the people who make you feel safe. She said she finally understood what that meant. I asked her what she was trying to say. She looked directly at me. And she said I had become her home. I felt my heart stop. Then she started crying. She said she had spent years looking for love in all the wrong places. She chased excitement and romance and grand gestures. But when her life fell apart, the person who stood beside her was me. The person who never judged her. The person who opened the door without questions. The person who made her feel safe. I reached for her hand. And for the first time in 12 years, I held it. She smiled through her tears. I think both of us knew our lives had changed forever. She never moved into that apartment. Instead, she stayed. Slowly, naturally, our friendship became something deeper. We cooked together. Went for evening walks. Talked for hours. Laughed until our stomachs hurt. And one ordinary Sunday afternoon, while planting flowers in the garden, she kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no music. No audience. Just two people who had finally realized they had been standing beside their happiness for years. A year later we were married on the same porch where my grandparents once sat. The ceremony was small. Simple. Beautiful. The sky was bright blue and the flowers we planted together surrounded us. As she walked toward me, I remembered the woman who had knocked on my door wearing one shoe and carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She looked completely different now. Peaceful. Happy. At home. Sometimes life doesn't rescue us through miracles. Sometimes it rescues us through people. Through kindness. Through doors that open when we need them most. Through friends who refuse to let us face our darkest moments alone. And sometimes the person you've been searching for is the person who has quietly loved you all along. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Heartline Stories and help us spread stories of hope, friendship, and second chances to people who may need them today.